worst lineup replacements in metal history. Metal fans forgive a lot. Weird albums, decade-long gaps, even embarrassing genre experiments. What they don't forgive is the wrong person taking someone else's seat. We're counting down 9 lineup changes that fans still argue about decades later. And you'll notice something here. Most weren't about talent. They were about timing and stepping into someone else's shadow. Number 1. Iron Maiden. Bruce Dickinson, Blaze Bayley. In 1993, Steve Harris had to find someone to carry vocals across a catalog built for Bruce Dickinson's multi-octave range. The Number of the Beast, Power Slave, Seventh Son of a Seventh Son. He picked Blaze Bayley, previously fronting the far less famous Wolfsbane, reportedly out of an audition pool of hundreds. Bayley sings low and grounded, and Maiden's back catalog does not. Live, the classics strained, and the band never retuned material downward to meet him. The X Factor, 1995, and Virtual 11, 1998, are Maiden's 2 lowest-selling studio records, and both land at the bottom of essentially every ranked list of the band's discography. There's also a decent case that the real damage started earlier, with Adrian Smith walking away in 1989 and taking a chunk of the band's songwriting instincts with him. Years later, before Bayley ever showed up, my read, Bayley got miscast, not outsung. His voice actually clicks on the handful of Virtual 11 tracks written with something darker and heavier in mind, closer to where Harris's writing was already heading. And Harris himself has defended those 5 years publicly. The instrument was never the problem. Nobody ever wrote him the right sheet music. Dickinson and Smith rejoined in 1999. Brave New World landed in 2000 and kicked off arguably Maiden's strongest commercial run since the 80s. A fast turnaround, once the band admitted the swap hadn't worked. Not every mismatch gets fixed that cleanly. Number 2. Judas Priest. Rob Halford, Tim Ripper Owens. Okay, so here's the twist on this one. Judas Priest actually found a genuinely talented replacement, and it barely mattered. Rob Halford left in 1992 amid personal and business tensions, and Priest recruited Tim Ripper Owens, a guy who'd been fronting a Judas Priest tribute band before landing the gig. And listen, that's not a joke. That's his actual origin story, and it's a large part of why the movie Rockstar exists. Owens has real pipes, arguably closer to Halford's range than any of the other names on this list came to their predecessors. Jugulator, 1997, and Demolition, 2001, are the 2 albums that resulted, and the honest verdict from most corners of the metal world is that they're heavier and more aggressive than anything Priest had made in years. None of that saved the era from being treated as a footnote. Old school Priest loyalists split cleanly down generational lines. Some genuinely preferred Owens' more brutal delivery, plenty of others simply just refusing to accept anyone but Halford in that seat, regardless of how well he could actually sing the part. Halford came back in 2003. Since then, Priest as an organization has treated the Owens years almost like they didn't happen. Both albums were left off streaming platforms for years, and the band rarely, if ever, plays that material live. Owens has been open about how much that stings, especially since a solid chunk of retrospective opinion has warmed on those 2 records since he left. And Halford, for his part, has said publicly it's nothing personal. He just doesn't feel like listening to Priest songs he didn't sing. Judas Priest is proof that wasn't good enough and never had a real shot are 2 completely different failure modes, and fans will absolutely mix them up if the name on the mic doesn't match the poster on their wall. Number 3. Van Halen. David Lee Roth, Sammy Hagar, Gary Cherone. Gary Cherone joined Van Halen in 1996, carrying an almost impossible weight. 2 previous singers, each massively loved by a different chunk of the same fan base. Roth built the band's identity across 6 untouchable albums. Hagar carried a second commercially huge decade after him. By the time Cherone, poached from Extreme, showed up, the Roth versus Hagar argument had already been running for years. Cherone wasn't picking a side. He was a third option nobody had asked for. Van Halen 3, 1998, is routinely cited as the band's low point. What's actually notable is how rarely anyone attacks Cherone's singing specifically. On paper, the pairing made sense too. Nuno Bettencourt, his bandmate in Extreme, built a guitar style with an obvious Eddie Van Halen influence baked in. It just never translated once Cherone was standing in Eddie's actual band. One album. Cherone was out by 1999, the shortest tenure of any Van Halen frontman. The band drifted through a loose Hagar reunion before landing the real one, Roth returning for a celebrated 2007 tour. Cherone went home to Extreme, still active and respected, with 2023's 6 reviewed well. He didn't get worse at his job overnight. He just got handed a decades-long fight that started before he ever showed up. And even that fight had 2 clear sides. Up next, the fight doesn't have sides at all. Just one frontman trying to hold together a band that kept vanishing underneath him. Number 4. Guns N' Roses, Slash, Buckethead, Robin Fink, DJ Ashba, and whoever else was available that year. Okay, so this is less a single lineup change and more a decade of Axl Rose auditioning the entire session musician circuit while the rest of the world waited for an album that took until 2008 to show up. Slash was gone by 1996. What followed was a genuinely dizzying rotation. Robin Fink of 9 Inch Nails came and went twice. Buckethead played guitar in a KFC bucket on his head from 2000 to 2004. Bumblefoot Ron Thal joined in 2006. And DJ Ashba stepped in from 2009 to 2015 after Chinese Democracy had already shipped without him on it. Chinese Democracy finally arrived in 2008, and a huge portion of the old fanbase never fully accepted it as a real Guns N' Roses record, since Axl and keyboardist Dizzy Reed were the only people left from the classic lineup. The sound had shifted too, more layered and produced, less like the band that made Appetite for Destruction. Even the guitarists who lived through it don't all agree with each other. DJ Ashba had said flatly that Buckethead just didn't fit the vibe of the band he grew up loving, chicken bucket and all, which is a pretty remarkable thing for one hired gun to say about another. Slash and Duff McKagan eventually came back in 2016, and the band has spent years since quietly reworking old Chinese Democracy era material with the classic lineup back in the room. That alone tells you everything about how the era gets remembered internally. It wasn't one bad replacement. It was an entire decade of the band trying and failing to replace an identity, not a guitarist. Number 5. Metallica, Cliff Burton, Jason Newsted. Cliff Burton died in a tour bus crash in Sweden on September 27, 1986. Jason Newsted pulled out of the far smaller Flotsam and Jetsam, inherited a bass chair fans still treat as sacred. What happened over the next few albums says more about Metallica's grief than about Newsted's playing. Exhibit 1. His bass was buried almost to silence in the mix on And Justice for All, 1998, so badly that a fan-made remix restoring his parts still circulates today. The prevailing read on that era is that the surviving members never fully processed losing Cliff, and Newsted absorbed the fallout for it. And I mean, he lasted 15 years and 4 albums, through the band's biggest commercial run on the Black Album, and into the tensions the Some Kind of Monster documentary later put on camera. He left in 2001. Robert Trujillo took over in 2003, and a large share of the fanbase, especially anyone who came aboard during Justice for the Black Album, will tell you flatly that Jason-era Metallica is their Metallica. This one barely counts as a bad replacement story at all. You know, it's closer to a band handing someone an impossible job than never quite letting him have it. Black Sabbath managed something similar with a lot less grief and a lot more confusion. Number 6. Black Sabbath. Ozzy Osbourne, Ronnie James Dio, Ian Gillan. By 1983, Black Sabbath had already survived one massive lineup change. Ozzy Osbourne was fired in 1979, and Robbie James Dio actually pulled off the impossible, delivering 2 genuinely great albums, Heaven and Hell and Mob Rules. That expanded the band instead of diminishing it. Then Dio left acrimoniously in 1982, and Tony Iommi made one of the strangest hiring decisions in metal history. Ian Gillan, the former Deep Purple frontman whose voice had almost nothing in common with either Ozzy's doom-laden moan or Dio's operatic power. The story behind the hire is almost funnier than the album itself. By most accounts, Gillan agreed to join during a night of heavy drinking with the band's manager, and reportedly didn't remember committing to it the next morning. The resulting record, Born Again 1983, actually charted well, hitting number 4 in the UK, Sabbath's best chart placement since 1973. But Gillan himself has trashed the mix publicly for decades, comparing the finished sound to something out of Spinal Tap, and the album's infamous cover art, a demonic screaming baby, became almost as notorious as the music. Gillan left after 1 album and 1 tour. Sabbath moved on to the 7th Star era with yet another lineup, and Born Again sits in this strange, permanently unresolved spot in the catalog. Too weird to fully embrace, too interesting to fully dismiss. It's the closest thing on this list to a genuinely great mistake. Megadeth's version of Chasing an Unreachable Ghost was a lot less colorful, but arguably hurt worse in the long run. Number 7. Marty Friedman, Al Pitrelli. Marty Friedman spent a decade shaping Megadeth's lead guitar sound on Rust in Peace and Countdown to Extinction before leaving in 2000. Drawn toward Japanese pop and world music instead of where Dave Mustaine was steering the band commercially, Al Pitrelli stepped into the chair for The World Needs a Hero in 2001, and most of the criticism aimed at that record has never really been about Pitrelli's playing. It's that the songs themselves landed flat and no guitarist alive was fixing that. Mustaine has ranked his own guitarists publicly over the years, and Pitrelli sits in the lower half, but not at the very bottom. That distinction goes to Glenn Drover, who came later, which tells you the whole post-Friedman guitar chair turned into a revolving door for a stretch. Every new name measured against a Rust in Peace-shaped ghost. Pitrelli does have real defenders, too. His solo on Dread and the Fugitive Mind still gets brought up as criminally underrated, on par with Tornado of Souls. Pitrelli's run ended in 2002, when Megadeth paused after Mustaine's arm injury. Drover, then Chris Broderick followed, before Kiko Loureiro settled into the seat from 2015 to 2023. Closing out with The Sick, The Dying, and The Dead, a record plenty of fans point to as Megadeth finally sounding dangerous again. Friedman's shadow still hasn't fully lifted. Some eras just get frozen in place as the ceiling. Ozzy's camp knows that exact feeling too, just with a different guitarist's name on it. Number 8. Ozzy Osbourne, Zakk Wylde, Gus G. Zakk Wylde held Ozzy's guitar chair for roughly 2 decades, 1987 to 2009. The same towering, inseparable from the sound presence Randy Rhoads had been before him. Reports at the time suggested Ozzy felt Zakk's playing had started overshadowing the songs themselves. Gus G of Firewind took over in 2009, and even though almost nobody questions his ability as a player, the swap still ended up cited on more than one worst lineup changes in Metal Rundown. This one's a legacy problem more than a talent problem. Scream, 2010, Gus G's only studio album with Ozzy, doesn't get hated so much as skipped. Ask fans to name their favorite Ozzy deep cuts across every album, and Scream tracks barely come up. Treated more like homework nobody finished than a record anyone actively dislikes. Gus G toured with Ozzy for close to 8 years, but never landed a second studio record. When Ozzy went back into the studio for Ordinary Man in 2020 and Patient Number 9 2022, he pulled in a rotating cast of guest players instead, Clapton, Jeff Beck, and Tommy Iommi among them, and brought Zakk Wylde back for live shows. That's the verdict, delivered without anyone having to say it out loud. Gus G at least got to fade out quietly. Our last case wasn't nearly as gentle. She got run out in public. Number 9. Nightwish, Tarja Turunen, Annette Olsen. Tarja Turunen founded Nightwish's sound in 1996, a classically trained operatic soprano that basically wrote the rulebook for symphonic metal as a genre. The band fired her via open letter in 2005. 2 years later, Annette Olsen, a Swedish singer with a pop-rock background and a light, warmer voice, took the job, and the fan base split down the middle almost immediately. And listen, the cruelest detail here, Bye Bye Beautiful off Dark Passion Play, is widely interpreted as a direct shot at Tarja. Olsen had to sing it, night after night, inheriting a grudge she had no part in creating. Plenty of people still call her voice underpowered next to Tarja, or peers like Simone Simmons. But there's just as strong a contingent that considers Dark Passion Play and Imaginarium among the band's strongest writing, full stop. Olsen left mid-tour in 2012 over illness and internal conflict. Nightwish's fix wasn't to go back to Tarja. It was Floor Jansen, who can hit the old operatic power and still handle the more accessible material Olsen had been singing. Annette's 2 albums did real work as the bridge between those 2 eras, even if nobody hands a bridge much credit for holding up traffic. Run through all 9, and a pattern shows up fast. Almost none of these people actually got outplayed or outsung. Owens might have been the best pure vocalist on this entire list, and it still didn't matter. They walked into rooms where the fan base had already decided what belonged there, and no amount of raw skill was going to argue anyone out of it. The bands that recovered cleanest were the ones that eventually admitted the swap was wrong. Maiden brought Dickinson back. Van Halen went back to Roth. Nightwish split the difference with Floor Jansen instead of picking a side at all. So tell me in the comments, strip away how each era gets remembered and just rank raw talent. Who's actually the most skilled musician on this whole list? I don't think it's who you'd guess.